Well, I've been collecting and reading and studying and fascinated by fairy tales ever since I was a kid. And I've always found that some of the ways they are classified in mythological or psychological or sociological point of view is a little bit reductive. And I always felt that the true power of a fairy tale was actually in the fact that it was at the same time very simple and very brutal. Simplicity in these days we're very afraid of. We're afraid of tracing characters that are typologically, they can work in the fairy tale like the Big Bad Wolf and Little Red Riding Hood. We're very afraid of, we shy away from that. We shy away from magic that is not explained. Is the Hollywood upbringing of storytelling where you have to explain every piece of magic and therefore castrate it and destroy it. I think that characters can be types and still have an emotional reality. You know, I don't need to nuance the Doctor to the point of making him a John Cassavetes character and then he won't fit in that movie. Or if I nuance him to become like a Todd Field character, or you know, I think that we're working with types in this tale. And Mercedes, who is again a heroine and a good character, nevertheless is capable of great violence to the captain, which the girl is not. The girl is not capable of doing violence to anything alive, you know. So they are different. They serve different functions in the tale. If the rebels in the woods are the woodsmen that come and rescue Little Red Riding Hood from the belly of the wolf at the end, and if the captain is the Big Bad Wolf, and if Ophelia is Little Red Riding Hood, they have to have a little bit of that fairy tale simplicity we talked about. One of my favorite fairy tales, which is called The Three Hairs of the Devil, one of the rules is when the devil is asleep, if you pluck one of his hairs, he'll have to answer any question you want to ask him. And why? Because that's what it is. If you pluck his hair, he's going to answer. So the rules generate themselves. They generate a magical universe, and they give you a sense of a world that is inaccessible to you, but that is fully formed. And that is an act of simplicity. And I find that the hardest thing to pull off in art is actually simplicity.
Vamos.
I thought it would be really interesting to take a period after the Civil War and create a companion piece to Devil's Backbone. And this would be about fairy tales, but applied to a rough context, a rough period, which was around 44 in Spain. Now, 44 in Spain was 5 years after the Civil War is officially over. The world is finishing World War II, you know, Normandy is happening, and the resistance in Spain is expecting the Allies to look back. And I thought the fairy tale then, occurring at this crossroads in the history of Spain, would be a fairy tale about choice and about disobedience, about a girl that needs to disobey anything but her own conscience, her own soul.
Una cartilla de racionamiento por familia. Examínenlas.
You can take incredibly important subjects and deal with them in a fairy tale or in a parable like that. Most fairy tales, when they do, they finally expose their morality, you can then trace it back through the tale easier. For example, if I tell you that the movie is about choice and disobedience, if you go back, you can trace it in Pan's Labyrinth through the disobedience of the Doctor, or the disobedience of Mercedes, or the obedience of Carmen. You know, how they each represent an aspect of these things and how each one defines who or she is through it and so forth. So it's an interesting process that when it concerns Ophelia, I think it's very important that she's also not yet mature sexually, that she's still a girl.
He decidido daros otra oportunidad.
In fairy tales, there is a tradition of these prepubescent girls going through a rite of passage that involves them blooming into womanhood or independence. It is such a classical theme that there are actually one or two books that I've read about it. And most people identify immediately. What comes to mind is Alice in Wonderland or Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. But actually the tradition is much, much older. And I think this is important because Bettelheim says that fairy tales actually exteriorize conflicts and matters that are intrinsically human and interior and make them manifest. You know, so it's the struggle that we all go through into becoming adults or young adults. It's exteriorized by opposing forces in fairy tales. The wolf, the witch, each one represents different aspects of the world.
Lástima.
In fairy tales, monsters exist to be a manifestation of something that we need to understand. Not only a problem we need to overcome, but also they represent, much like angels represent the beautiful, pure, eternal side of the human spirit. Monsters need to represent a more tangible, more mortal side of being human, aging, decay, darkness, and so forth. And I believe that monsters originally, when we were cavemen in, sitting around a fire, we needed to explain the birth of the sun and the death of the moon and the phases of the moon and rain and thunder. And we invented creatures that made sense of the world. You know, a serpent that ate the sun, a creature that ate the moon, a man in the moon living there, things like that. And as we became more and more sophisticated and created sort of a social structure, then the real enigmas started not to be outside. The rain and the thunder were logical now, but the real enigmas were, once we became social, all those impulses that we were repressing, cannibalism, murder, these things needed an explanation. You know, the sex drive, the need to hunt, the need to kill, these things then became personified in monsters. Werewolves, vampires, ogres, this and that. And I think that monsters are here in our world to help us understand it. They are essential part of a fable.
Mi nombre es Ofelia. ¿Quién eres tú?
Soy un fauno.
The character of the faun in the movie is not Pan. Pan would be too dangerous a character to put in a fable like this. I think that I wanted the character to be a faun. Pan is only the translation of the international title of the film. And a faun is by definition a creature that is both a giver of life and a dangerous, savage creature. So it's sort of an ambivalent character, and I wanted to visually make him also very different from the fawns that we're used to, where most of the people, when you talk about a faun, they imagine the little dancing fawns in Fantasia by Walt Disney or Mr. Tumnus in Narnia. You know, but these are really, you know, they're not powerful and ambiguous in the way I wanted this guy to be, which is he could look truly evil and truly twisted and actually scary, and at the same time look very elegant and beautiful and fragile. Originally, I wanted to make him very small, make him almost like a child-sized creature, but I realized that it was better to have him be not only an adult, but an old, ancient creature instead of a childish creature. We tried to redesign him to feel old, but old not in the terms of chronological age of man, but almost eons of age. Like this thing has been there since time immemorial. You know, this thing is made of the same things that the woods are made of.
Nombres viejos que solo pueden pronunciar el viento y los árboles.
The idea in fairy tales, one of the rules that they have, one of the rules they use very often is the rule of three.
Si cuentas hasta 3, sin tartamudear, te puedes ir.
A man in a quest has to go through 3 tests. A genie will grant you 3 wishes. There was a man that had 3 daughters, 2 were bad, 1 was good. There are 3 tasks, 3 doors, 3 this, 3 that. It's a rule of 3. So in the movie, that rule of 3 is applied throughout, in the real world and in the fantasy world. For example, the 3 doors that she has to choose, but she doesn't choose the one that the fairy is pointing at. She chooses the other one, the one that her instinct tells her to do. She has also to go through 3 tasks, and through those 3 tasks, she will reveal herself to be or not to be the princess and so forth. And the idea for me was also that amongst the characters in the film, there should be, for example, the fascists were represented by 3 guys, which is Vidal and his 2 sergeants, And then you have 3 women, and they are permutations of femininity, different ones. Mercedes and Ophelia, that are essentially an older and a younger version of the same character. And the mother, who's very different, a very different type of character. And if you continue, for example, there are 3 fairies, a green one, a red one, and a blue one. There are 3 thrones. Obviously, there's a trinity in the other world, the mother, the father, and the daughter, and you can continue like that. The movie is full of the rule of 3.
Que fue amada por sus súbditos y que dejó detrás de sí pequeñas huellas de su paso por el mundo, visibles solo para aquel que sepa dónde mirar.
The movie also talks about how the things exist in the world only for those that know where to look, and I believe that one of the key moments in the film, in terms of symbology, is when the girl finds the eye of the statue, for example. And in order to start seeing the world again the way she needs to see it, she completes the face of the statue by putting the eye in, and then the fairy appears, And I think the girl from that moment on starts looking at the world, or is capable of seeing the world in a different view. When she encounters her stepfather, immediately after encountering her stepfather, she has the second encounter with the fairy, with the insect, and it guides her to the labyrinth. So in a way, it's one reality pulling her away from the other reality. And by the same token, one of the things that I try to showcase which I think is the very fabric of film, is looks. I think films are made of looks. And so I always try to showcase and be very direct in the way I tell the actors where to look, how to look. The eyes are the beginning of it all. The movie is full of details that are there only if you dig a little bit. And the way, I think that the reward in doing this is that it will expand the movie with each viewing, because I think that it's not an addition of elements, it's a multiplication. And it's really interesting. It's almost like a game of interpretation. With this movie, or Devil's Backbone and Chronos, it's actually worth going through them and finding these things. In Chronos, alchemy. In Devil's Backbone, there is repetition and rhyme. And in this one, there's a lot of layers carefully built.